All right, I'm going to give you a demo on Foundry here at Rocky Mountain High School. And what this is about is casting aluminum. So I'm going to melt aluminum. In fact, I have it in the process of being melted right now. It's pretty close. Back here I have a furnace. And it's showing, there's a number there that's showing 765. It's getting up to 820 degrees Celsius is what. And inside of that furnace is a crucible. This looks like this. It's a graphite crucible. And I loaded it with aluminum. So we have a lot of aluminum that we can kind of recycle. In Metals One in the shop, we make rings on the lathe, and then these are like the leftover remnants. And I can even use formerly melted aluminum. Like this is what we call an ingot. So that's just aluminum I had left over. And I'll probably have leftover from this project too when I pour it. Okay, but it would be hard to melt down like aluminum cans because you'd have to cut it into really small pieces. But it could be done. Okay. So that's a crucible. We used to have a furnace here also that had a crucible this size. We could make a lot bigger castings. That furnace is gas powered, like natural gas, and we've had issues with it over the years. It's expensive, it's loud, it's noisy, it's lots of fumes, so we don't use that much anymore. All right, with this casting that I'm going to make, the first thing you need is a pattern. Okay, and the pattern can be a lot of different things. Pattern is usually made. In fact, my previous job, I was a pattern maker in a metal foundry. And this is a belt buckle pattern that we actually made on SolidWorks and printed it out on the 3D printer. There's a little hook, it fits on your belt. And then we drill holes in there and put the thing. This anvil could be used as a pattern. Okay, because this has been cast, it's steel, and we're using aluminum today. There's lots of different patterns, but the key to having a pattern work successfully is what's called draft. Okay, and draft is an angle, is bevel. One thing to think about is ice cube trays. When you pour water into your ice cube tray, there's that draft. And when the ice is frozen, the draft allows it to come out. If that was 90 degrees or square, the ice cube would not come out of the tray very easily. You'd probably have to break it out of there. But what that means, draft, there's a little bit of draft here and a little bit of draft in there, just to make sure that we can get it out of the mold. What we're making the mold out of is sand. And here's some sand in our sand table here. And this is, it's kind of, I like to compare it to a snowball. It's actually like I can pack it like a wet snow and make a snowball out of it. So it holds itself together really well. Okay. I'm going to be casting four little keychains, and they're all similar, very close to the same, but that's what I'm going to use as a pattern. So I have these keychains that we 3D printed. There's a little logo on there. On the back, it has our Rocky Mountain High School Makers Guild. I don't know how all that's going to come out in the casting. It's hard to see it on the video, but I'm going to arrange these as such that I'm going to try to cast 4 of them at once. Okay. Right. One thing out here. Okay. I have the sand in this table. Let me readjust the camera for you. And by the way, halfway through this, I'm going to mention the tool of the day, so pay attention. All right, so here is my table. One thing I forgot to get prepared is some parting compound. Let me just do that. It won't take very long. And parting compound, you'll see how that works in a second, but I need some in this little bag here. All right. Okay, so the main tools that I'm going to be using here, this is a flask. And the flask is designed to hold the mold together. There's two halves, a cope and a drag. I'm going to use a riddle. And the riddle is for sieving the sand. You'll see how that works. And a shovel, a rammer, a striker, and a sprue hole cutter. Okay. So I'm going to start by putting this face down, this part of the flask. I like to put it over here. And I'm going to get this set up, and then I'll show you closer with the camera. So right now I'm up to 825 degrees, so that, I'll do a quick check. Yeah, it's not melted yet, but it's getting there. The aluminum inside of there. So I'm going to take 4 of these little keychains, position them here. And this is what it's going to look like to you. There's 4 of those keychains in there. Now I'm going to use what's called parting compound. And parting compound is going to separate, the sand is going to separate from the pattern and the board there. That's about all I need. It's just like a light powder. What used to be used was walnut shells, crushed walnut shells. So inside of there are the 4 keychains. I'm going to be cutting my hole right in the middle. All right, so here we go. Next step is to fill this with sand. Get you a little closer here. Okay. So fill this with sand, and I start with the riddle. Let's call it a riddle. Not the tool of the day, but a tool in this process. And I put some sand in here because I want to get that first layer of sand to be nice and fine and fill in all the details. Okay. So I'm rubbing sand into the riddle, and it's just putting a nice thin layer of sand over the top of those keychains, those plastic keychains, and using it as a pattern. That's good enough. And then the rest I can basically just fill it up. So now I'm going to shovel in sand into here. There's that big snowball. Break those chunks up. Again, the sand's really sticky. It's an oil base, oil and clay, along with sand to make it really sticky. Okay, I'm going to have to do this a couple times. So this is called a rammer. It's just a handle with 2 big flat things. There's a couple different versions of this. Packing the sand down in here, or ramming the sand. That's the peen end, like a ball peen hammer. Peen end. And I want to get this all the way filled up. It's not full yet. Okay, then I use, there's actually a real tool for this, but I can just use a piece of flat steel, which is known as a striker. And I'm just making that flat. I'm going to keep the sand in the sand table here. You can see how it's almost like clay, the sand. It does have clay in it, and it's oil-based, but it's really known as sand, foundry sand. All right, so there we have it nice and flat. Almost, there we go. And I've rammed it pretty tight. So now I'm going to flip this over. This is a relatively small flask. Some flasks are a lot bigger, so it's a pretty physically demanding job to be a mold maker. There are tools that help though. And here you might be able to see there's the three patterns, the three keychains, and they're flat in the sand right there. So now I have to make the second half of the mold. It's called the drag. Cope in the drag. And I need a little more parting compound, so I need this to separate. If I get some parting compound down in that text, it might show up. Okay. Put the second half of the flask back on. And it's important for me to know where I'm going to cut my sprue hole, and that's where we pour the metal. So I'm going to cut it right exactly in the middle, right between there, right between there. Right, so the first thing again is to riddle some sand. This doesn't take very much because it's all flat. Just get a thin layer on there, and then fill this up and ram it, and I'll be ready to cut my sprue hole. Ram around the way. So this is what I would call low tech. This has been around a long time, and there's no computers used. Here it can be done with, the furnace over there is electric. It's called an induction furnace. But there's also, people do this in their backyard with charcoal in a hair dryer, because the charcoal gets hot and then the hair dryer gets it even hotter by blowing the air across it. So there's lots of ways to melt the metal. Aluminum, like I said, melts about Fahrenheit around 900 degrees, and we pour it around 1300 or 1400 degrees. Sure, this sand's pretty new, so it sticks really well in here. If it's old and kind of dirty or has been used, you have to really ram it good so it stays in there, because we don't want it falling apart when we separate the mold. You'll see that in just a moment. All right, there's my striker. Right, now I have to make a hole to pour the metal in. And what we use is a piece of conduit. It's a conduit. And that was right in the middle. Right there. I'm going to kind of mark it off with my thumb how deep I need to go. So I need to go about that deep. All right, so there is my sprue, it's called. And now I can separate the two halves of the cope and the drag because I have to get the patterns out of there. Perfect. The text on the back is here. It might have come out. We'll see. Get my mold maker's tool. And so the metal is going to be poured. Let me see if you can see this. In the backside here, or down in the top, and it's going to go down in this hole. It's going to be very liquidy. Shiny liquid. It's going to look like, if you've ever seen Terminator 2, it looks like that. And then I make a little reservoir here. And then it's going to go into there. Then it's going to feed into where the patterns are. I think you can see that. So now I have to cut kind of what I call gating. So the metal is going to go into here and then feed into each of these keychains. I have to remove the keychains. We don't leave them in there. The pattern in mold making for metals or foundry, the pattern gets used over and over. So I can use these keychains multiple times to make patterns, or that anvil that I showed you, or the belt buckle. But the mold only gets used once. Okay, and that's the sand mold. And the reason for this is metal shrinks a lot when it cools. Earlier on, we kind of talked about that. Metal shrinks a lot when it's cooled. And when it shrinks, we don't want the part that we're making to break or to stretch and get stressed. We want the mold to break. So we make it out of sand, so the mold will be the part that collapses. These, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but if we had an engine block, say, or a fire hydrant, which are all cast parts, you don't want that thing to crack. You want the mold to break up. All right, so now I need to get the patterns out of here best I can. There's one. And that's just my 3D printed plastic pattern. 2. Kind of learn the just go for it, flip it out of there method. If you try to dig, and it sometimes doesn't work very well. 3. There we go. Okay, now I just want to make sure the gating goes in there well. If you're taking metals 2 next quarter, you will be doing this. You will be making a mold. A little bit of finesse here, just to all the negative space is where the metal is going to be. So the hole is a negative space. The metal is going to go down in there, and it's going to go into this, and it's going to fill in all of these. All right. We also have a technical tool which we sometimes use. The bellows, and these are just in lieu of an air compressor. Bellows. Okay, so there's the mold. I'll try to get a little closer shot of that. That was not quite melted. I need to tend to that. It's really hot. It's just glove on for this. There we go. That'll melt real quick here. All right, let me double check this. Good quality casting has a good mold. So again, the metal is going to go in that hole up here. Once I close this up, I'm going to hit that center screw and then flow into the 4 patterns or the 4 mold cavities, ideally. If I can make that happen, we'll see. There's one little thing that's bugging me in here. The other one should be pretty good. All right. So I put this on the right way. This pin here is round, the back, and this pin here is a hexagon shaped. So that has a slot, so I can't accidentally put it on backwards, which would scrap my castings. They wouldn't come out properly. I think we're all good. I've seen all the sand fall out at this moment right here, if it's not packed right. All right. So next, I need to get my safety gear on. Includes a leather jacket. Low here, leather jacket. Face shield. If there is too much moisture in the mold, the metal could explode because it's going to turn into steam. So it's really important you have safety gear on, so if it backfires, you're not getting molten metal all over your skin or your face. Okay, one more thing I have to do is add flux. Let me turn this up a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to add what's called flux, similar to the flux that's in on welding rods. I need a flux adder. And what the flux is going to do is bring the impurities to the surface. So there's like, if there's dirt or oil on that aluminum, it's going to bring that stuff to the surface. Then I can scrape out. That's really black and dirty looking. Just knock that off on the floor. So I'm getting cleaner metal. I'm doing this. That sucker's really hot, but you might be able to see that some of the black impurities on it. Okay. And make sure I got you in focus here. Yep. So I'm going to now use the tool of the day. I'll mention it again. Might as well watch this. Don't go enter it yet. This is the cool part. These are called pouring tongs. So I can grab the crucible with the pouring tongs. And here we go. It'll be quick. There it is. That is all she wrote. This is a ingot mold, so I just can pour the remainder. There's not much into the ingot mold. Put the crucible back into the furnace. Turn it off. Let it cool down. Okay, so that is, you can kind of see that, I think, is smoking and kind of bubbly. That is the, oops, there you go. You know, you really shouldn't play with that metal, but I can kind of show you how soft it is. That's just liquid aluminum, just starting to solidify. Okay. And in a couple minutes here, really we should wait till it completely cools down if we were trying to make a good quality part. But in this case, we'll be able to shake it out. And once I think it's adequately cool, which is going to be about a couple minutes here. I'm just going to do a little cleanup while I wait for that. The ingot's really hot there. Here's the ingot I poured into the ingot mold. Just that little piece. That was the leftover aluminum, but now I can melt it real easily. It'll fit in the crucible. You don't want it to freeze or harden in the crucible. While we're waiting just a little bit longer here, put some of my tools back. Get those out. That's a molding tool. Again, the tool of the day is crucible tongs. Here's another set. And these.
On at the beginning, so I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was like the Foundry, but yeah.
That's fine. As long as you're watching this. For these big flasks, let me show you over here real quick. It's kind of interesting. Against the wall over here, these are crucible tongs. So for that big crucible that I showed you earlier, we would pull this out of the furnace. Here's the big furnace down here. I think you can see. And we go in there and pull these out. Those are the crucible tongs that pour it out. Then we have a pouring shank also. Okay. Again, this is pretty quick. Typically, we wouldn't what's called shake out. We wouldn't shake it out this quick, but I'm confident that it's probably solidified enough. It's a pretty small part that's in there. The sand was room temperature, so that helped absorb the heat and pull the heat out. So we should be pretty good now. But if we were doing this for a quality part, I would definitely wait till it cooled down. And there is going to be more smoke and more heat before, if we pull it out too early, which is going to be right now. So just one thing I'm going to do is turn the fan on. We're notorious for smoking people out this end of the building. You can probably hear that in the background. That's the welding hood for the fan. All right, so here we go. There's the 4 parts. They're aluminum. I'm going to shake this out. What that means is just I dropped it down into the sand table. Then using some other tongs that are designed for the task, which are nowhere to be found, somewhere. Oh, where did my tongs go? There they are. Yeah, I just had them. So I'm going to use the crucible tongs, maybe, hopefully. Not the right tool for the job, but should work. And there are 4 aluminum keychains. And I'll be darned, on the back, I can actually read the laser engraved etching that was on the back of the pattern. So we went from a plastic 3D printed pattern to aluminum keychains. The Lobo logo on it. My Lobo logo. I'm going to cool this off so you can see it a little better. Dip it in water. And I'm back. Here we go. There they are. So now this takes a little bit of cleanup. I have to cut these off here. They all turn out pretty good. There's a little porosity there, a little hole under that eye. These turned out really good. And then, so I'll have to cut these off there. And you can see here's one of these really clearly. Rocky Mountain High School Makers Guild. All right, so that is the tool of the day, crucible tongs. That is the Foundry process. And